I know I'm not the only one who has noticed how expensive life is getting. I think I have many heart palpitations when I go grocery shopping because I can't believe things are still getting more expensive. So I started thinking about ways that I can cut back my spending in different areas of my life. Here's the thing, as a gardener, gardening feeds my soul. I really don't want to cut back my gardening budget. So this video is dedicated to lots of money-saving tips for gardening this year. Tip number 1 is to repurpose or reuse anything you can. Anything you can. So for example, maybe you have some flower pots that are looking pretty dingy. Maybe they took a beating from the weather. How about we find ways to make those pots look better? We can spray paint the outside. If it's a plastic pot, make sure you're using a spray paint that adheres to plastic nicely. Maybe we want to do some decorative painting on the outside of our pots or something like that. Another thing, garden statuary, garden furniture, anything that adds to our garden as a permanent fixture. How can we find those things or make those things with reused items? The bench that I'm sitting on today is actually a bench that I made out of pallet wood. So I painstakingly took a pallet apart and built this bench and just painted it in the black and white colors that I wanted to fit my garden decor in the area I was placing it. Another thing, maybe there is something in your area that is plentiful or easy to find. My example for this is stones from the beach. Here I can walk my beach and I find beach stones readily available. If I just collect a handful at a time, let's say, I find they are great vase or pot fillers. So, for example, I want to propagate my snake plant and I know I don't want the cutting of my snake plant to touch the bottom of my glass vase. I fill that bottom with the stones that I found at the beach and boom, I'm all set. Tip number 2, share plants with friends, neighbors, or locals. I know maybe this sounds obvious that you could share plants. Maybe you're not exactly sure how to go about doing that or finding anybody to share with. I think social media is a great way to do that. Just put a little note out there saying, hey friends, I have an abundance of some sort of plant in my garden. I'm looking to offload some of it and I'd love to maybe trade with somebody else. If you're doing that with people that live in your area, you're trading plants that do well in your climate, which is great. Something we need to keep in mind is that while we find free plants or free garden materials to be like a major score, other people are looking to get rid of certain things. For example, blanket flowers grow prolifically in my garden. I have and get more blanket flowers than I can ever use, even on all sorts of parts of my property. So I always dig up my blanket flowers and I share them with other people. In fact, I have Earth Day parties just to do this. So I can invite my friends and neighbors over. I let everybody take home plants that I have from my garden and it's awesome. Another plant that I have that grows plentifully for me are canna lilies. I do have quite a variety of canna lilies, but like this year, I had no yellow in my garden. My neighbor down the street, she grows yellow, but she didn't have the color coral that I had. So it was awesome because we just got to trade our canna lilies. People are definitely willing to share things that aren't fitting in their garden or they have too much of. They want other people to have it and enjoy it too. Let's not be afraid to ask. Tip number 3, buy clearance plants or buy plants from local plant sales. Often local plant sales are plants that have been given to a group or organization by donation. So any money that the plant sale makes is basically just icing on their cake. That could be a great way to find some things that do well in your area. Buying plants on clearance can be a little bit tricky because you're often buying plants that are maybe not in the best shape and you might have to nurse them back to health. If you're afraid of doing that, then that might not be a great tip for you. But I have found things like my arborvitae trees, they were all 50% off simply because in their nursery, they were packed too closely together and had gotten brown on the sides where they were packed in and touching each other. But I got all 4. They are now living beautifully in my yard. My dianthus I had bought on a clearance sale, and dianthus is doing beautifully for me. It blooms like all the time. And buying bulbs on clearance is yet another way to get the plants that we want, but it's just after the time when they were selling most popularly. Tip number 4, utilize Facebook Marketplace, thrift stores, and yard sales. Okay, Facebook Marketplace, you can do a search right in your area, places or people that are local to you that are getting rid of things that you're looking for, like maybe stones or bricks, something you can add in your hardscape, maybe planters or statuary. Keep in mind, people are putting things on Facebook Marketplace because they want to get rid of them. So it is not going to be a hassle for them if you want to pay a low price because these people want to get rid of these items. Thrift stores, yard sales, same sort of deal. Things are usually at a really low price and you can do awesome things with these items. The blue bench that I have in my yard was from a secondhand store and I bought this bench for $25. It is wood and metal and it is just an unbelievable value. Sure, I had to put some elbow grease into it, but it is worth the money. Also, at a thrift store, I was able to find all the pieces that I needed to make this bird bath. Again, a little bit of elbow grease, but it is so worth it. Tip number 5, divide your perennial. Maybe that one sounds obvious too, but for example, I dug up and divided a bunch of hostas that I had in my yard. Every hosta I dug up, I was able to divide into 4. I was then able to line the entire side of my house where I had no plantings whatsoever, all with these hostas, and I essentially made them for free. So maybe when you're looking at things to buy in the store, look for things that you will be able to divide in the future. That will save you so much money moving forward. Liriope is another thing that I have and I've divided, and I'm doing that because I want to line the whole front of my flower bed border with liriope. Same kind of deal. The bigger they get, the more division you have, and then the more plants you have. The snake plant is yet another example. I've talked a lot about dividing up a snake plant. You can propagate a snake plant in soil, in water. It's not difficult to do. Snake plants are not necessarily the cheapest items out there. So if you can make more from what you already have, it's a win. And hey, you can also trade those things with your friends for other things you don't have. Tip number 5 is to propagate anything you have. It doesn't take much, a Google search or YouTube search, to find out what propagates easily for you. Maybe it's just a cutting and you can propagate things right in water. That is something that I love to do. It's my favorite thing to do because I can see the roots grow. Watch them, and then I plant them into pots in soil. So propagate, absolutely anything you can. Tip number 7 is to start your plants from seed, bulbs, or bare roots. That is so much more cost effective than just buying a plant outright and putting it in the ground. You can get many more oftentimes, or if you're starting things in your home, indoors, you can also get a jump on the season, growing something to begin with, and then putting it out into your landscape already looking pretty good. Bulbs are excellent because, like I just experienced buying bulbs on clearance, I was able to plant them in the ground. For me, it's in December, winter time, and I'm going to have an awesome spring show to show for that bit of work and finding some stuff on clearance. Tip number 8, if you're potting up your plants and you have a huge planter, don't fill it completely with potting soil. Potting soil can be really expensive. Instead, do things like use another plastic pot that you have that's empty, put the pot upside down inside your bigger pot, and then fill with potting soil. The pot that you put in upside down will take up so much room, you'll end up using so much less soil. Besides that, with the potting soil, you do not have to fully change out your soil from year to year. You can do a nice mix of the old potting soil that you just had and then adding in, say, half of your pot with new soil. You could also add in some fertilizer, some organic matter. These are all things to keep your potting soil fresh and still working well for your plants. But don't fill your big pots with fresh garden soil. Tip number 9. Oh goodness gracious. This is make your own mulch or use pine straw around your trees, in your gardens. I'm here in North Carolina. It's actually very popular to use pine straw as a garden covering instead of using mulch. When I bought my house, everything had pine straw in every garden. I have switched over to mulch just because I favor that and because I choose to use black mulch as a nice contrast to my plantings. However, if you have trees that you're cutting down in your yard, or maybe your neighbor is doing that, if you can chip up those trees, what fabulous insulator for the plants in your garden. Mulch can be expensive, and if you don't catch that mulch sale like I like to do in the spring, where I load my truck up with bags of mulch, it could be really expensive. Lastly, tip number 10 is overwinter absolutely anything that you have space for. Sure, I am fortunate because I now have a greenhouse. I overwinter things like crazy in there. That's the main reason I got a greenhouse. But am I the only one that overwinters plants in my bathtub? I probably am not. Use spaces by windows. As much space as you have, as much space as your significant other will allow you to use in your house, but put plants in pots by windows, take care of them inside, and then reuse those pots in your or those plants in your landscape the next year. Reusing your own stuff is just such an amazing cost saving. I hope these tips are helpful for you. I know I'm using all of them for my gardening year. Good luck to you. Happy planting.